Jeanette Bronée, and I care a lot about people learning how to pause and listen and ask more questions better.
And what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice I've ever gotten is to invest in ourselves, to invest in myself. That's the one thing that keeps carry us through because I think we humans are so focused on fixing ourselves, and it really is about learning and growing ourselves. And that takes investment, it takes learning, it takes engagement with other people, it takes being curious, it takes all of those things. And if we think of investing in ourselves, and I'm not talking about just money, I'm also talking about attention and time and care, I think we grow, we rise and think of ourselves as we matter instead of trying to get that from other people.
Mm,
And it was an advice my
invest in
dad gave me.
ourselves.
Yeah. That was an advice
Your
my
dad
dad.
gave you.
Yeah, yeah, and he gave me that when I was worried about spending money or going to take a new course because I wanted to learn something. I was somebody who always tried to learn something new, and it didn't necessarily make any sense based on what I was doing. So it felt a little bit like I was like, "Oh, I'm wasting time and money because I'm trying this over here and this over there and that over there." And today, looking back, I really appreciate the diversity of the things I've learned because it grows
Wow.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, your dad was a very smart guy. So where do you think he got that, Jeanette? Where did he learn that? And what did he do for work?
Yeah, well, my dad started out as a radio technician and ended up being an executive search consultant and had his own company very early on when what it was called headhunting and when people were really new to the idea that somebody else was out there looking for the people you needed. And he always said, I don't think of influencers as the people who are talking about themselves. That's not the people I look for. I'm not looking for the people who are shouting the loudest about who they are and how good they are. He said, I'm looking for the people that other people talk about. And so I always thought of this idea as influencers is not the people who are louder and talk about themselves, but really about being in the service of others. And that's something he really always taught me was giving, not giving back per se, but just more meaningful. Like that is part of what gives us more meaning in life is the connection we have with other people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean that is so important,
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
That is so important. So let's talk about that a little bit more. That investment in people being in the service of others. And then we'll move into talking about power pausing
Mm,
because I think that's important. So how do we do that when we have to take care of ourselves
mm,
first?
mm. I always think that we have this idea that taking care of ourselves always becomes this to-do list, right? And the reality is, and that's what my book is a lot about, is to think of self-care as a mindset because we have a mindset with us all day long. And that mindset is a perspective with which we think, it's the way we engage with other people, and it becomes how we make decisions. So if that mindset is, I'm not good enough, I can't do it, I don't, I'm not, then that is how we engage with other people, and our relationships will suffer. Our work will suffer. So if we can think of self-care as a mindset that is self-caring rather than a to-do list of, oh, I'm supposed to do all these things. And it really shifted for me because I grew up as a competitive gymnast. And so this idea of body and mind, this idea that our physical and our mental agility and strength was really where, I was, brought up to have this sense of self. And what I learned when looking back is a lot about the value of the team because I wouldn't
Mm,
have had that. I wouldn't have had the self-confidence if it wasn't because I had good relationships with my team, a good relationship with the other people in my team, if we didn't support each other. Because if I failed, it would impact everyone else, right? But if we all won, or if we won, we would all be happy together. And this idea that we are bringing out the best in each other by cheering on each other, and that's how we do our best, is again part of this self-care isn't really about self, it's about care. So I'm really in the book shifting a lot of these ideas and belief systems that we have about what self-care means. And so one of the big things that happened then when I later, I've gone through a lot of, you can call it trauma, but like, let me just say adversity and difficulty in my life challenges that I had to really be adaptable and agile and keep thinking forward. And my dad, again, always taught me that. He taught me how to be curious about what's possible, even when it looks hard. And one of the things I learned about self-care versus care of others was when he was dying and I was his caretaker or caregiver. And for a while, I thought of it as caretaker. And I was running around doing all these chores and taking care of and, things like that. And then he said to me, hey, listen, um, he said two things that really changed how I look at myself and who I am in the world and how I engage with other people. He said two things. He said, why are you so angry with me? And I said, I'm not angry with you. I'm just really stressed and I'm really angry at the situation. And he goes, yeah, but to me, it feels like you're angry with me. And it really had me pause and be like, wow, wait a minute. My stress is affecting him in a very negative way. And here I am. I want him to be happy. I want to do all these things for him. So I'm taking care of him, but I'm not in that mindset myself that is caring. And then he
Hmm.
said, I don't need you to take care of me and do all this stuff. What I need you to do is come here, sit down, hold my hand, and talk to me, or rather talk with me. I want to know that you care about me. That's what matters. And that shifted everything. For the entire time that I was his caregiver, we instead cultivated a really deep relationship. And I could say goodbye in peace with him. He could say goodbye in peace. We did have the time to prepare. We had 5 months where we knew it was ending, but we just didn't know when. And it was really this idea that we were digging into the beautiful humanness that we have rather than the tragedy of what was happening. We were really together. We were just really building on good memories and things that could live on and lessons that I could take with me. And that was his point, right? He wanted to give me as many lessons as possible that I could keep using today. And I do. And I smile every time I think of him.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes me smile. That's powerful. And
Mm.
that shift from caretaking to caregiving is that's so profound. Caretaking, doing laundry, cleaning
Yeah.
windows,
Yeah.
making dinner, caretaking, caregiving, slowing down,
Yeah.
being present,
Yeah.
and saying, okay, I'm with you. I'm giving you my care.
My attention.
What a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift. So you mentioned there, that's a beautiful segue into talking about the power of the pause.
Mm.
The power of pausing that you reference in your book. And your book is masterful, by the way. There's so much there that we could talk about. I mean, really, we could spend 3 hours just going after this. We're going to focus today on the power pause because I think that is the universal truth, if you will, that we all need. But is that also from your dad? Did your dad tell you about the pause, or where did you get this, Jeanette?
Yeah. In hindsight, he did. I didn't think of it that time. But in hindsight, he did because he always said, could you slow down a little bit so you can do it right the first time?
Ooh, ouch. Ouch. What a nice man. I could get some of that advice. I slow down. Okay, so tell me. So
Yeah.
dad gives you this gift, if you will.
Yeah.
Define
Yeah.
it for us, Jeanette. What is the power pause?
Yeah. So I didn't only learn it from my dad. I learned it because I studied mindfulness and Buddhism for many, many years. I think for 35 years now, I've been a student. And it's really have taught me a lot about our emotional reactivity versus our getting in touch with our emotions and choose how to respond. And that's what the power pause is really about, that gap between being triggered by something and reacting, which I think we see all the time when we're under stress, right? That's why I say power pausing is essential for managing how we deal with stress. And so we humans are running on instinct when we're under stress. We do what we've always done. We get stuck in the repetitive habits, patterns, the way of thinking, the way of acting and reacting and engaging with other people, right? And we get stuck in a protective kind of like fear-driven way of being. And so the power pause allows us that small moment, that gap in time to just say, okay, hey, before I respond, how do I choose to respond? How do I choose to engage? How do I choose even to think, right? We can choose how we think. Not if we don't pause though. It's not like, oh, you choose your thoughts, but you do choose where you put your attention. And that was one thing my dad did teach me, because every time I would come to him with a problem or a fear, and that would actually be the worst advice I ever got was, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. And I still get that advice every single time, like all the time, right? People are like, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. I think that's the worst advice anybody can give, because you're not being heard. And so, for example, my dad was very embedded in leadership and how leaders could be more empathetic leaders. And this is already back in the 80s and 90s, when I was listening to my dad speaking to other people as a headhunter. He was extremely interested in what makes people do what people do and what is the patterns. And that power pause can shift our attention from all these things that are not working and what we worry about, and be like, okay, I'm really in the worry trap right now, or what I call the pothole. And that power pause can just be, wait a minute, I can see my mind is like a hamster wheel going about what all the things I'm worrying about, I'm getting stuck. And I did that as a child. I would get stuck in these worry patterns. And I was like, you had to slap me to get me out of it, because I'd just be like, almost like an anxiety. And my dad would, instead of saying, don't worry about it, he would say, okay, tell me more about what you worry about. And now what would you do about it if the worst happened? Okay, now you know what to do about it if the worst happened. There's a good potential that it won't happen, but now you have a plan. So now go try what it is you want to try. And we're talking teenager here. We're talking a little girl. He said, okay, now go try what you want to try and come back and tell me how it went. So he would encourage me to be curious and have courage. And I realized later, as I was learning about Buddhism, I always said my dad was my Buddhist teacher. He just didn't know what Buddhism was, but he taught me how to be more in touch with how our automatic patterning of being human is affecting how we experience life. And so one of the examples he gave me in terms of being a caring leader was when we tend to say, don't worry about it, it'll be fine, you got this. That is not instilling confidence in anyone. And he gave me the example of when a little child is scared that there is a boogeyman under the bed. If you just say there are no boogeymen in the world, don't worry about it, go to sleep, that child is not going to sleep, because that trust in a parent is not enough to not believe that there's a boogeyman under the bed if that child is really scared. But crawling down, holding the child's hand and looking under the bed and saying, look, there's no boogeyman. What else do you need so you can feel safe tonight? Oh, I want to leave the light on. Okay, let's leave the light on. And he gave me that simple example in how we as leaders can engage better and therefore actually create trust in the person, not in what happens around us or other people, but in the person itself. And I think of the self-care mindset as building that trust within ourselves. And that comes with that power pause of recognizing, what is the thoughts that are spinning? How am I feeling right now? What can I do about it? And how do I communicate with other people what I need? And that's really the framework in the self-care mindset, but it starts with a power pause. Without it, there is no change.
Wow. Wow. That's so good. I wrote down a bunch of that. The one big one that I want to pull out, besides the boogeyman, which I think is interesting, right? But not only going down there and showing that there is not a boogeyman, but also what else do you need? I think that's great. And I'm going to definitely try that with my 8-year-old, because he has some fears, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
All 8-year-olds do.
Yeah.
And I have
I
been
was about 7
terrible
or
at
8
that.
at that time too. So yeah.
Yeah. But the whole tell me more, what would you do if the worst happened? so that you have your plan Z,
Yeah.
and now you can make other plans that might be better than if the worst happened. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that let's talk about the three types of power pauses,
Yeah.
because you talk about that in your book, and I think it's really important because I guess I pause there to think, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? But that's only one of the types of pauses. And that isn't why the pause is so important. It's not just that, but the intentionality, which
Mm.
I think is super cool because my word of the year is intention. And I
Yeah.
want to be more intentional. So let's talk about that,
Yeah.
Jeanette. We
Yeah.
have the pause
Yeah.
first, like the actual boom. I'm going to pause.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the power there?
Yeah. So I think of the three pauses as the 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, or it could be longer, but and the 1 minute pause is really that physical pause there just for a moment. Say, okay, let me ground myself. Let me feel my feet on the ground. Let me take a couple of breaths. Let me just reset my system. Let calm the nervous system down. And so that I can reclaim my attention and reclaim where I'm going and reclaim agency. You can think of it as the boxer that goes into the ring. If they go for those 9 rounds, but if they don't do that 1 minute power pause every 3 minutes, there's a good chance that they will still be stuck in the back in the round they were just potentially failing. And so the same thing happens when we're going from conversation to conversation or task to task. Our mind is trailing behind or running forward. So to get us into this moment, we can use the body to just pause there for a moment, anchor ourselves, come back. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Inhale all the way into the belly. Exhale through the mouth. And already I'm thinking that you're probably feeling much more calm in your system. So such a simple way to calm the nervous system down. And we can do that as we're waiting for a Zoom meeting to start. We can do it while we're in a Zoom meeting. When we see ourselves feeling a little bit like, whoa, we can just calm ourselves down. And it could also just be that moment where we're like, okay, I'm thirsty here. I gotta get a sip of water. I'm dehydrated. It could be the more simple stuff that we need throughout the day to keep our mind fresh. But it also is that moment to just ground ourselves in the nervous system. And then the second pause is to check in a little bit more with how we're feeling. And so a lot of times I think we might feel irritable about something. We're in the middle of a conversation. We notice that we're feeling anxious. We notice that we're feeling, whatever we're feeling. And so the power pause with that is to check in and be like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. We're not fixing that. That's the same as saying, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Like we tend to push away all that stuff, right? So reclaiming agency over how we feel and redirecting our attention onto how we want to feel is intention. So I always say intention fuels attention. So if our intention is to feel good, feel happy, feel engaged, feel positive, feel curious, feel courageous, feel confident, if that's our intention, but our intention is stuck over there because we're not feeling that way, we can simply ask a small question that says, okay, I'm feeling really anxious right now. What do I need so that I can feel more confident? I'm feeling really sad right now. Okay, what is the sadness about? What do I need so I can feel more joy, happiness, engagement? How do I feel more present right now? So if we're asking, what do I need so that I can feel however it is we want to feel, we're shifting our attention because we will answer the question that is being asked. That's how basic it is.
Wow.
That's how
So
basic it is.
yeah. So to check in on how we're feeling, right? What
Yeah.
do I need
Pause. Yeah. Yeah.
so that I can?
Yeah. And then
What
the
do I
third
need so that
pause.
I can feel good? Okay, I got you. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
And then the third pause is aligning with that, saying, okay, what is it that I'm really trying to solve here? How do I really get there? What are the steps I need to take? And now we're aligning with our mind and our growth mindset or our cognitive behavior that says, okay, what are the steps that I need so I can get there? and how do we solve this problem, whatever it is, right? We go into this more constructive mindset. So the first power pause is that physical. The second is that more emotional, how am I feeling right now? And then the third is more like, okay, how do we solve this? How do we move on? What are some of the ways what are some of the things we need so that we can solve this? Where are we going? So on and so forth. And really get constructive about that, because now we've shifted our attention based on the intention of what are we trying to achieve. Because if we're patching potholes all day long, which means we're just fixing worry, then we're solving the wrong problem. What we're doing is we're realigning with what it is we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve a cohesive team that works better together. Okay, what do we need so we can do that? Yes, we might look at some of the potholes and the obstacles. We might check in with how we feel so that we can use that as information. But what we really need to want to get to is, how do we solve the problem? Not in the old way that we've always solved problems. And that's, I think, is where the danger is right now, is that we're just going back to old habits. We're doing what we know works, and therefore we're stuck in old paradigms of how we work. And instead we can move towards, okay, what if we could solve this in a completely different way? What would it look like? So those are the three power pauses. But I interrupted you there. You had a question about the emotional part.
I didn't have a question. I
Okay.
was just repeating you. So that's beautiful. Um, so with all of that,
Yeah.
we talked a little bit before we started here about what's coming next
Yeah.
this year. Lots of stuff. I mean, it's a election year, presidential, lot of stress, lot of strife. How do we power pause through this? How do we
Mm,
make that work, Jeanette?
yeah. Well, I think of uncertainty as the new normal, except it's always been, but we haven't thought of it that way.
Hmm.
Right. But in our environment, we have always been a little spoiled in our modern society, if I can call it that, or a lot of us have, right? Not everybody, of course, because they have lived in uncertainty for forever and not been in charge of their own environment and so on and so forth. So I'm not dismissing that, but I am saying that a lot of us in sort of corporate or sale, like, entrepreneurs to some extent can recognize this feeling of uncertainty has always been there as well. And so I grew up in a family that on the outside looked very privileged, and it was because I ended up being safe all the time. But my dad was an entrepreneur, and he failed many times and went bankrupt as well and had to rebuild himself. And so I am a person who is in constant fear of me not paying attention to something and therefore failing and ending up in the same way, right? Because we believe that patterns repeat itself, history repeat itself. And so in a lot of ways, I think we get stuck in this belief system, which I myself can end up being stuck in as well. And I think it's important right now that we change the paradigm about how we engage with things that happen around us, especially all the worry and anxiety and uncertainty that's around us. Because we don't know what's around the corner, and we humans don't like that. We like to know what's around the corner. That's why we plan things. That's why we keep doing things. And yet that's the path of our suffering.
Yeah.
Whereas the path to our freedom is to accept the circumstances for what it is. And
Ah,
again, it sounds like I'm just, brushing over it, but it's actually extremely powerful. It's a small thing and it sounds so simple, but I'm telling you, it's not easy to do. It's not easy to accept the circumstances for what it is. It really isn't, right? But the minute we do, we're free to make new choices. And again, I had learned it through, Buddhism and mindfulness and studying all these books and texts and studying with many teachers about what does it mean to, like, happiness. What does that mean? And it means acceptance of our suffering, essentially, right? And it means acceptance of what is happening in our lives, which may be suffering. Human suffering is part of our history and journey, and yet not getting stuck in the story of that, but using it to fuel what we choose to do going forward. And again, I learned that the hard way when I was sitting with my dad and he was dying, and it felt like we could have done so much had we known, right? He was diagnosed too late. My mother died because of a doctor's mistake, suddenly out of nowhere. So, I lost my parents a year apart and both of them to cancer. And it was just, I felt powerless in that moment. But for me to accept that circumstance, I could now reclaim agency over what I would do with the situation I was in now. And that is how I was able to create a completely different relationship to what was happening, and therefore both enjoy, for lack of a better word, and really dive deep into a beautiful relationship building with my dad over that time. And that came from acceptance. And him too. The minute he accepted, because he was struggling against it, he was like, I don't want to die. And the minute he accepted it too, we were both free to do something with the time we had left. And I think that's how a lot of times we think of uncertainty as we have to control it rather than navigate it. And so if uncertainty is the new normal and change is more fast than it ever has been, how do we ride that and be in the flow of that instead of holding on to what we know, which is what causes our suffering and our stress? And how fast can we adapt to something and say, okay, that's no longer the case. What do we need so that we can do this? What do we need? And so it's becoming more in the flow of things. You can think of it as water, right? It'll always find a way in. You see the rocks and the this and the that. The water isn't just going to stop there and be like, okay, I'm stuck here. It's going to keep finding ways and crevices, and it'll keep coming in, right? If you've ever had a leak in your house, you know that.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. There's a Bruce Lee quote that says, "Be like water."
Yes.
Very simple, right? I mean, very simple.
Yeah.
But yet very, very hard to do. So help me out here, Jeanette. Help me out, because this is not my gift. I am not good at just acceptance. I want to fight it. I want to, I'm not Zen yet here. So help me out. Help me. How do I get started
Yeah.
with
Well,
this?
first, let me ask you, if I may, and if you don't want to answer, that's
No, go
okay.
ahead.
Why are you stuck in not wanting to accept? What is it about holding on that makes you feel stronger?
That's a good question. I think if I hold on, maybe it'll change
Mhm.
because I'm in control.
Mm.
And if because if it's up to me, I have a chance. If it's up to, the other individual, it's not.
Well, let me then make sure we talk about the same thing here. Are you saying holding on to the way things are, or holding on to your intention for what you want to try to achieve? Holding on to the intention of what you're trying to achieve
Yeah,
is,
I guess it's kind of holding on to what was, right? Like,
yeah, holding on to what was is
yeah.
a little bit of a waste of time. Sorry, Phil.
So Phil is wasted. All right, I got it. No, okay. So, all right. So
But
I
but if
buy
you're
that.
but if you're really intent on your intention,
Yeah.
that's different.
Okay.
You still want to get somewhere,
Yeah.
but we'll find a different way to get there. That's different. That's
Mm,
resilient. But you're thinking of resilience as holding on to what was, and I'm just going to fight against because that's control. It's actually not. It makes you more fragile. There's a Chinese saying that the taller the bamboo, the deeper it bows. That's in terms of humility and feeling humble. But there's also another saying that is that the stronger and the bigger and the older the tree, the stronger it looks, there's a good chance that that's the first that will fall in this storm because it's so rigid. Whereas the young tree will just bend with the wind. And a lot of us think of strength and resilience as that strong tree that's just standing there and doesn't move. But all the trees in my area that fall over and take away my power every time there's a storm, it's not the new young trees that bend. It's all the old trees that are standing there getting either broken or uprooted.
Yeah. So it's not austerity that gets us through this.
Mm.
It's really, it's really flexibility.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And that's how I think of the 3 power pauses as aware for number 1, how I become a little bit more aware. Then I'm working within my emotions so that I'm not stuck in an emotion, so I'm becoming more adaptable. And then I'm choosing what to do about it based on what is, and that is how I become more agile. So the three power pauses is always also being more aware, adaptable, and agile.
Hmm.
I call that my triple A.
Wow. Wow. Aware, adapt, and agile.
Yeah.
I like that. That's great. Well, before I ask you a last question here, I want to let folks know where they can get more of you, Jeanette, because
Mm,
you've got so much great stuff. We're only covering one piece of the book, but it is a thread that goes through the book. The
yes.
book is The Self-Care Mindset. Jeanette Bronée, you can find her at JeanetteBronee.com. I
Yeah.
put the little accent. Is that an
It
accent aigu?
it's an accent aigu. I'm
Yeah.
originally from the Huguenots.
Oh,
Yeah.
no,
I don't
really?
really know what that means, but that's okay. I've looked
No,
it
so I
up.
studied that in high school.
Oh, you
That's
did?
cool. That
Yeah,
is cool.
yeah,
So
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So
And you don't
get
need that to get on my website.
no, no, no,
Yeah,
no. That's right. That's why I didn't. Yeah, I just added it because I was showing off there. I know like one thing. So because
exactly.
the other way is ex Rav.
Yes.
So yep, and you fall in the grave. Yeah, that's how. Anyway, Mrs. Murray would be proud. That's all I remember. So with that, Jeanette, so much fun. So
Oh,
so with that, let's take people out with a little power pause, a little 1 minute. Let's get physical one more time and
yes,
pause with people because I think that's a beautiful way to end our show
yes,
today.
yes. All right, so let's feel our feet on the ground. Lower the gaze. Look ahead of you, a few feet, or close your eyes. It's up to you. And just inhale through your nose. Oh, long, deep exhale through the mouth. You can make sound if you're alone. If you're in the office, just do it quietly. Inhale through the nose, deeply into your belly. And exhale through your mouth. And one more inhale through the nose. And deep exhale. And feel your power in your feet. Feel how you're connected to the earth, to the ground, to the floor. And feel how strong that connection is as you're allowing whatever you're feeling in your feet right now, whether they're warm, buzzing, whatever they're feeling like, just allow that connection to be a foundation that allows you to keep coming back home to you, to learning to trust you, learning to cheer on you and care about you, because that is the most human we absolutely can be. May the pause be with you.